So we can gather and talk a little bit more about the personal statement and that specific part of the application that requires you to be able to write, express yourself, be deep and vulnerable, and highlight your qualities, your talents, and speak about yourself in a most authentic way, which is actually a very difficult thing to do. And that's precisely why most of my classes culminate to the point of writing the personal statement, even if I'm teaching persuasive and if I'm teaching explanatory, expository, all kinds of writing, I always circle back to writing the personal statement because it is one of the hardest things to do. So today, what I have decided to do is break it down into bite-sized teachings, or like micro dosing of writing. So hopefully those of you who are writing can get the most out of it and get a little bit of some direction as to what path to take. And those of you who are still new and this is something you will be doing in the near future, maybe you can begin planning from now, because like most things in life that require expertise, this too will require you to do a little bit of practice. Not a little bit, quite a bit, but even a little bit of practice will do versus no practice at all. So I always say, just like when you are planning to participate in a marathon, or if you're in any way, if you're involved in sports or anything, singing, musical instrument, whatever it is that you do, you have to put the hours of practice, and you cannot really fake it until you make it. In this case, it will have to come from practice. It will have to come from, some sort of experience that you're willing to accumulate. So writing is no different. It does require you to practice, and it does require a certain amount of expertise. Now, I've been asked, can anyone learn how to write? And is this something that I just need talent? So if I don't have the talent, why should I even attempt? And, it's kind of like, oh, done deal. I'll just put something together and send it out there. And I'll try to do what I'm good at. So in my experience, and this is the why I love teaching it, is because I have seen students improve tremendously when they begin the writing process and when they put the due diligence. So I will never say that this is just entirely based on talent. To me, the talent does play a role a little bit, but it's nothing that you cannot, train or acquire through endeavor and through experience. So this is why I accept students in my class, and I teach this very passionately in a hope that I make a change. And then, yes, do I see a change? I do see change, which gives me hope and further inspiration. So I do want to, first of all, clarify for those of you who might be, and in the meantime, I'll keep checking my text messages here. So if in any point of time you're not able to hear me, or if we have any technical difficulties, stay where you are and try to reconnect, because these kinds of things do happen. So I do want to clarify, first of all, and there's a little bit of misconception when it comes to the personal statement for the common and the coalition application for college. Okay, so those of you who might be new, just starting out, the personal statement is 650 words of an essay writing style that you will be submitting in the Common App or the coalition application. This is the essay that will go to all colleges that are subscribed to that specific application. So in other words, if we have about 1,700 colleges in the country and they accept, and half of them accept the Common App, all these schools at any given point, because they're part of that application, if you're applying to that school, they will be able to get on the application and see your writing. So the Common App essay goes to all schools that you apply. The same thing is true for the coalition application. So it is one area where you upload your essay and everyone can access, see it, read it. And that's the one essay that the main statement that you make about who you are and where you're going in life, or where would you like to go in life. So it happens to be a pretty important chunk of the application because, again, all of the schools that you're applying to will be able to see that one thing. Now, I do want to also distinguish here, and one distinguishing characteristic between the personal statement and the statement of purpose. Now, they might sound like one and the same thing, but they're not. And sometimes when students Google stuff and they try to self-prep and they, go through Reddit and whatnot, and they're looking for ways on learning how to write it like a week before the application is due, there's some misconception. And sometimes, more often than not, actually, I see them coming to me and they have a statement of purpose and not a personal statement. So let me explain the difference, because if you're the one writing it, you should know the difference. So you can look at your writing and say, hey, looks like I'm writing something that is different than what they're asking me to do. So the personal statement is just that. It is a writing that is deeply personal, that is about you, about your story. It is about your life, who and what you're all about, and where are you going in life. Usually the personal statement is based on some sort of an anecdote or a story that you would like to tell. Now, how is that different than the statement of purpose? The statement of purpose is usually written by students who are applying to postgraduate schools. So those who are applying to their doctorate, master's degree, any kind of a postgraduate institution that will ask them to write something about their academic qualifications and their work experience. The statement of purpose really is stating, what is my purpose in me seeking this higher educational institution, and what do I bring to the table in terms of skills, qualifications, and prior experience. This one is a little drier and not as personal in a way as the personal statement is, because it does talk about, it does highlight your qualities as a person, but more so your quality as a professional. So when it comes to the high school students, writing the personal statement is where we're looking more to see a story and tell a story. And as you know, we as human beings are very much storytellers. We tell stories all the time. We tell stories about ourselves. We tell stories about our friends and cousins and neighbors and family and all that good stuff. If you catch yourself during the day, how many times you're actually engaged in storytelling, you will see that you already have some experience. Even in your mind, as you hear yourself speak to yourself, you are telling your story. You're constantly telling yourself about something that happened in the past, and you're retelling that story to yourself. So if you catch yourself once in a while, know that this is you actually telling a story. So all of us are natural storytellers. And because we are that, we enjoy stories being told to us. So stories have been passed from the grandparents to the grandchildren, from the parents to the children, and it goes on and on and on. And we enjoy that process. Why am I saying all this? It might be common knowledge. I want to bring this to your attention because when you think of writing your personal narrative, your essay, you should remember that everyone who is reading your story is just a human being like you. So they really would like to be able to connect with you on that same personal level as you would want to connect to them. And we as human beings really are looking to be uplifted, to be loved, to love, to relate to others, to be personable and deep and not superficial. So knowing all that is going to really help you relax when you begin writing, so you know that you do not have to already be extremely accomplished, and you do not have to go and open the dictionary and look for words that you're just learning so you can use them and impress anyone. This is not about impressing anyone externally, but this is about relaxing and telling your own personal story in a most relatable and humanistic way. So now that we have that out of the way, and now we have figured out what is the difference between a personal statement and a statement of purpose, when you attempt writing and when you get through the editing stages, please remember to try to look for any areas in your writing that might in some way become a little too stifling, too technical, too monotone, too just drifting away from the personal, from the story. And they might be adding details that are not highlighting you as a person. Now, how do we do that? And I'm kind of mentioning the editing part, but I don't want to really focus on how to edit today, because that's a whole different class. What I really want to focus on today is more on achieving that ease with which we can approach the writing as a process. And that is really in some way, quite a difficult thing to do. It is quite a difficult thing for all of us. We all have challenges. Some of you might be really experienced in writing. You might think of yourself as a good writer already, and that might in and of itself be a problem. Some of you might have never really had to write anything that is deeply personal or more about like a story, but you have always just been asked to analyze, and you receive a grade at school and you're keeping it to that literally analysis. So for you, getting down to being personal and vulnerable might be a little bit of a problem. So whatever your situation is, I want you to kind of think about this as you have never learned anything so far about this, and you just kind of shake it up and look at it as very fresh process, sort of fresh set of eyes, and try to keep an open mind and follow along with what I'm about to say. So let's first of all think about this as there are some topics that the Common Application and the Coalition Application gives you. So speaking again back to the actual application of this, when you will have to submit these applications, these essays, or your personal essay to the Common Application, you will have to subscribe to some sort of prompt that is given to you. You'll have to answer something that they're looking from you to get. And I'm not going to go over the prompts. They're easily Googleable. For some of you, I've already given it. And for those of you who, are just starting out and you don't know, they can basically be grouped into 3 different groups. They could be 6, 7, 8, 9 prompts. It doesn't matter. Every year, things might change. But basically what they are is, the first group, they're looking from you to explain your challenges and how you overcame your challenges. That's the first group. The second group, they're looking from you to hear more about your talents, what makes you happy, what do you engage your mind with, what makes you flow, everything that is your environment, your culture, your identity, and your talents. That's the second group. And the third group really has to do pretty much with, you being grateful and expressing gratitude to someone or somehow an event that made a difference in your life. If we have to look at these 3 groups and look for something that is very, very similar, we will see that no matter how different the prompt is, they're pretty much asking you the same thing, which is, who are you? Where are you coming from? What did you do? What was something that you encountered that you overcame, and how did you overcome that? Did you overcome that with any kinds of talents or specific character traits like perseverance and tenacity? And then what was the outcome? Where are you today? This is what they want to hear from you. And this really is what the personal statement in some respect happens to be. So if you have to think of this as a timeline, and if you think of yourself as a little stick figure and you have to position yourself on that timeline starting from, sometime in the past, and then you have that, you can even think of this as a graph or whatever works for you, however your mind works. And then you see yourself somewhere on that perpetual line in the future. This is the area in which you'll be operating, going back and forth, today, tomorrow, and the past. So you will have to tell that story from that, perspective of time and space. So this really, in essence, is what they're asking from you and what you will have to deliver. Now, I will take a few steps back, and I will really urge you to begin journaling if you're not at the nick of time and having to produce that personal statement as of yesterday. So if you have a little bit of time in your hands, do journal. Some of you might say, oh, that's so much time taken from my schedule, and I have so much to do already, and I have finals, etc. just keep a journal, keep your tablet, your iPad, your, on your phone, on notes. Maybe you want to, keep a little paper diary with your pen, paper, pencil, something near your bed. Just a little bit before it's time for you to sleep, write down a couple of lines. It will really, really strengthen your ability to tell what happened, even if it is just in the past couple of hours of the day. Trust me, this exercise is very, very beneficial. You will slowly become better without realizing it. But now, to those of us who do not have the time and you guys looking for something very quick to be able to implement. So I just now spoke about the timeline and you being a stick figure here and orienting yourself in time and space. Some of you sit down and approach this process like this. You look at the prompts and you think, well, let me sit down and outline, and what should they write? What should they write about? Oh, okay, I'm going to tell the story about, my uncle and his little business and how one time, something happened and there was an intruder, and I'm just coming up with things. Okay, so here's my story, and I was right there and I jumped in and I saved the day. Okay, this is my story. Okay, this is what I'll be telling today to everybody about. Well, that's great. And you sit down and now start thinking of how to tell the story. This is what most of us maybe have learned how to practice when we approach writing. And this is really the hardest way to approach writing a story, any story. Those of you who are in my writing class, you guys know I give you impromptu writing and I give you a couple of words and a few pointers and I put the timer, and then you turn out a story in 10 minutes that is amazing. Okay, it has a climax and a solution, and there is a character, and you're able to do it in 10 minutes. So I don't know if any one of you has wondered, why am I able to write that story so quickly, in class, and I'm just given 10 minutes and I can just whip it up. I don't even know what I'm writing. And then when I sit down and brainstorm and outline, it takes me days upon days, and then I write. And then sometimes I doubt myself, I rewrite it, I totally mess up my good writing with bad writing, and then I get discouraged. Well, this is the reason why, is because in the first scenario, you don't know you're about to write. You really don't know. So there's that moment of spontaneity where you are so unexpectedly taken aback with the first idea that kind of strikes you, and you are willing to be an open-minded person and give that idea that strikes you life. Okay. And so when we talk about approaching the writing process, which is sometimes, they call it the writer's block, and looking at the empty paper or the blank screen, and you don't know how to begin, and there are a ton of thoughts in your head, and you're just really fighting it all, and nothing seems like a good idea. That is the hardest way to approach writing. So I would say, when you're feeling relaxed and when you think that, okay, I just want to be playful, I'm not approaching any prompts, I'm not going to be looking for anything at this point in time, I'll just sit down and I will put the first sentence down playfully in a most relaxed way. Then, this is one of the most difficult ways to approach writing, is when you look at the prompt and you feel stifled and you feel like you're literally caged by the you're caged by the prompt and what the prompt is asking, and you're now starting to doubt yourself, like, what do I give? What do they want to hear from me? Who is judging me? What are they asking me to show? And all that kind of stuff. So, and that really is just a really very painful way to approach the writing process. A better way, just kind of a more relaxed approach, will be to just, stay playful. So let's say that you're starting to write something and you're just, playing around, and you're like, okay, I have a feeling, and this is the feeling. The feeling takes me back to the time when, I had to move from one school to another, and I didn't feel welcome, and I just felt like I'm out of place, and everybody knew what they're doing, and I was confused, and I felt out of place, and it was just really difficult. Let me just write down a few lines about that. Okay. So, and you start, doodling and just kind of toying around and playing with that idea. By the time you're done with a paragraph or two, and, so you sit down and think, okay, so how do I know that I have a story? Like I'm looking through this paragraph, 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. Now, how do I know that this really is a good story? I mean, I have it, I'm writing, or maybe I'm writing about that speech debate thing that happened. And I felt like a loner and everybody had a partner and I didn't know how to talk to people yet. And I was the brand new one, or, my best friend, I suddenly figured out they're all talking behind my back, or whatever it is that really bugged you. And you just feel like there's an emotion there and you just want to get it out of your chest. Okay, so how do you know if you have a story? And how do you know that this story really is worth telling? So here's what you do. You take a look at your paragraphs and find the character, which is yourself in this case. Take a look and see, does this character, or does the character, which is, you again, do you in the context of your writing emerge, is the only character in that story thinking that you're the center of attention? You might have 10 of your friends in there. You might have the coach, teachers, classmates, the robotics team. It might be the debate team, whatnot. Okay, this could be a whole slew of things. But do you as a character feel like this is your voice and you can hear you speak and you're the center of attention? You think that this is all about you? Or are you having we and us and they and my friend? If you have all these disturbances and noise, okay, that means that you're not focused entirely on your personal emotion. When you speak about yourself as a character, your emotion needs to strike as yours, and you're thinking that you're the sole doer of everything. You're the center of attention. Do not worry about thinking that you're coming across as arrogant or, self-absorbed and, there needs to be teamwork and none of that stuff. That comes later. We, the audience, the readers, will have to hear you. We will have to feel your emotion. We will have to hear your internal monologue. Okay. All right. So are you the one that is in the center of what's happening, narrating it back to us? Do we hear your voice speaking? Follow that voice. Follow yourself as a character. Are you in motion? Okay, which means, have you gained momentum from the very beginning when you're describing something about yourself, your childhood, or what's happening, where you're going, and how you're moving until you run into something and now there's an obstacle? So if you're this free-flowing person or an object that is in that space and time that I just now described, do you see yourself from motion hitting a wall, hitting something that is an obstacle, something impossible? As in, usually it doesn't happen, one day, this is what happened. I hit an obstacle, I had an idea, the decision came to me, and the next day I got up and everything changed. I had a schedule, I knew what to do, and I was awesome and better. It doesn't happen like that. There's usually a little bit of time when there's doubts and uncertainty and struggle and questioning, and there's like some definite opposition of your mind is screaming the opposite that you want to do, and your brain, your body is telling you something else, and your friends are bringing in doubt. That needs to be felt. That needs to be felt and told in normal voice. It needs to be told as you would speak, and it needs to come from the gut. That is called deep writing. It needs to really be very vulnerable and very simple. It has to be very simple. You don't need complicated words. You don't need anything here. So if you have gained momentum and you run into something, and that's when, when there is that opposition is where the change will show and you will emerge on the other side. So this is where you have to spend about a paragraph of your writing into explaining and reiterating. So make sure that this part, when you have hit the obstacle, or when the obstacle seems like the most impossible thing to resolve, that you're able to tell and spend time on that. And this is where the deep adjectives come. Okay, so what action will you take in the face of the obstacle is what your story is about. It's not about you getting there. It's not about the obstacle itself. It's not about how hard it hit you and what implications it had, but it is about what action are you planning to take in the face of that obstacle? So I want to kind of repeat that again intentionally, because I have to tell you, this is what the personal statement is all about. And if you did not, if I never brought it to your attention, or if you didn't think about it this way, if you were spending too much time thinking about, what kind of story should they be telling, and, what is this all about? And, should it be about, should this be about the speech and debate club, or should they tell the story about the robotics club, or should they tell, what should they be telling? That is not the issue. And that's really not what you should be really spending most of your time about. Your time should be spent on understanding that your story starts. The essence of it, like the heart of your story, is the moment you not only hit the obstacle, but what you do after that. And we'll dive into that a little bit, because I want to make sure that this is very, very clear. So clear that when you begin writing anything from now on, even if that is your journaling, like I said, please journal for 10 minutes, 5 minutes at night, saying something, anything, even if it is gibberish on your iPad, phone, notes, whatever it is that you use, tell it in that way. This is what happened in the last 2 hours. My friend texted me, and we were supposed to, I'm just coming up with something right now to give you an example. We're supposed to get together. I was supposed to go to the birthday party. The last minute they canceled, and they're not going to come with me. And now I have to go alone. I feel uncomfortable. I feel let down. Okay, this is the problem. It just happened. I'm writing it down. I'm journaling. It's a very, very trivial thing, right? Someone might think, well, that's what you want to write on your personal statement. Like I said, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It could be the most trivial thing. It could be about your aversion to avocados. It doesn't really matter. It's about how you tell it. And so here's what I'm journaling about: feeling let down by my friends. So I have hit a problem. This is, in someone's life, this could be a very big problem. In somebody else's life, it could be, vacationing in Italy and getting a phone call where they understand in that very minute that when they come back in just maybe a couple of days, when they come back to the United States, they will never see their father again. And, this is it. They will never get a chance to experience the wisdom that their father was going to give them and prepare them on how to live life, how to be better, and how to learn how to be the men that they're supposed to be, because their father is gone. And they learn that over a phone call, and their whole life changes. So this could be any problem, all right? This could be something life-shattering, and this could be something very internal and still equally shattering, because it has to do with self-esteem and personal ego and, personal implications of some sort, emotions and whatnot. So now that we have hit that barrier, we have to articulate in a sentence or two, what is it that we're going to do? What action you take in the face of the obstacle is your story. So I just want to repeat that again. What action you take in the face of the obstacle is your story. And whatever action you take is how your ending is going to be. And that's why when we write, I always say, leave the beginning, leave the ending, focus in the middle, and then we will see where this is going. We don't know yet. We don't want to know. Remember, we don't want to have it all planned out. We want to be free, and we want to be unhinged when we write, and we don't want to be stressing out about, oh, I must definitely end it like that. Then we worry about the beginning. And sometimes the beginning might be your ending, and the other way around. You might just completely topple this whole thing over on its head and start with the end in mind. So feel free and make sure that you're not in any way stifled by any prompts or by any pointers whatsoever when you're writing when you're writing deep writing, or as I say, from the gut. Now that we have it all figured out, and I'll repeat this once again, okay, which is, what action you take in the face of the obstacle is your story. And again, the obstacle doesn't have to be external: travel, school, friends, family, death, sickness, birth, or it does not have to be internal, as in, internal turmoil and some sort of catharsis, internal catharsis. But one can lead to the other, and the external could lead to internal catharsis, and the internal unknowing and brawl can lead to an external problem. So they could be related. So any obstacle is good enough as long as it is an obstacle that gets on your way and prevents you from getting somewhere, and you make a decision to change that. So very carefully take a look at your writing. Okay. Now that we have that established and we know what we need to do to have a story and how we can approach that, I would like you to maybe write down these several questions. And these are the several questions that you will use from now on when you begin to write. And you could be writing anything, my friends. As long as you have these questions, you will be able to produce personal statement of purpose, as I explained earlier. You'll be able to write a play. You'll be able to write a song. You'll be able to write a book. You'll be able to write. Okay, so these are the questions you need to have answered and ask yourself when you begin writing. When I teach grammar, I tell my students that grammar is not a set of rules as they teach you at school. Scratch that. Anybody says that, look at them and tell them, I respectfully disagree. Why? Because grammar is a series of questions, not series of rules. As long as you know what kind of questions you ask and you find the answers to these questions, you have grammatically well-structured sentence that leads to grammatically well-structured paragraph that leads to grammatically well-structured story. The same thing happens to be true for writing. So if you have these several questions, and if you keep asking questions as you write, your story will write itself. The first question you need to ask and have it answered is, who is it about? Okay, so we kind of covered that already, but I still want to repeat. Why am I repeating this so many times? Because sometimes they read your writing and it turns out that the story is great, but it's about grandma, about mom or dad. It's about how mom and dad came from another country and how you came about and how they're so important in your life, but it's still about them. It happens to be about grandma's cooking and her nurturing and her love, but it's about grandma. It happens to be about, uncle, aunt, somebody that does something that is extraordinary and they have influenced you and your life cannot be the same without them. But it's about the uncle or the aunt or what they do or what they have built. Maybe it is about a patient that you saw in a hospital and you were so impressed, etc. It's about the patient or it's about the hospital. So anytime you have writing, take a good look. Who is it about? Is it about, you have to ask yourself, is this about me? And that's why when I began at first, I said, make sure that there's all about me, I, my. That needs to be there. Even if you're writing about a group activity, about collaboration with friends, about being in a team, about being, no matter what, that will have to come as secondary. In the first plan will have to be you as a character. So ask, who is it about? If you're talking about your project that you have done and it means so much to you, your nonprofit or your research or whatnot, is the story about it? Or is it about you? Because if you have focused too much on the nonprofit or the for-profit or the project, the research, the professor, the travel, then the story is not about you. And that's where immediately there'll be a disconnect between the audience and your personal part of the writing. So who is it about? And if you clearly find, dig in for evidence, this should be very, very clear. The who needs to equal to you. The second question that you need to ask and have it answered is, what do you want? Okay, so who is it about? Me. What do I want? This needs to be very, very clear. Again, this will shift you from having to write about uncle, aunt, mom, dad, travel, project, whatnot, it will shift you to what is it that you want, okay? What is it that you want and why do you want it? So I want that project. I want to be like my aunt. I want to, work or learn or be in the club or have the nonprofit. I want. And what is it that you want? So name it. Find it in your writing. Is it clearly mentioned in several different ways, reiterated and well explained? Does it connect to you? Okay. So who is it about? What is it that they want in this case? What is it that you want? Okay. The next question that comes, and these are just, again, have them, and maybe if you're writing it, put an arrow and write down the next one, put another arrow, that they lead to one another. Okay. Why can't you get it? Okay. So you have to clearly explain as to why there's a problem. Why are you not getting it? Because this is where the conflict starts to build and starts to get juicier, and the plot starts to thicken. Why is it that you cannot get it? Is it disability? Is it some sort of mental problem? Is it physical problem? Is it somebody else presenting a problem? What and why? Okay, so you have to very clearly answer this question. The next thing comes, what are you doing about that? Okay, or what are you going to do about it? So now that we know you can't have it, you cannot reach the cookie jar, what are you going to do about that? Find the chair to step on, solve the problem. Okay, so what are you going to do about that? The next question that you have to ask as you read to understand if you have a story, or once you write the story, go through the questionnaire so you can check and see if the story really stands and it does not have any plot, inadequacies. Ask the question, when you're trying to get it, ask the question as you're describing it, why doesn't whatever it is that you're trying, why doesn't it work? Okay, why can't you get it? Why doesn't it work? So what happens a lot of the times I see in writing, especially personal statements, is I see that students are explaining their problem, explaining why they can't do something and how the disability is there. Or maybe, the dad is traveling, the son is helping mom with the business, why the grades are low, why the business is not running. Or he's saying that, okay, he traveled, he got his internship and he was not able to pass the test. He went all the way to Russia and, now he's there. He doesn't know what to do. He feels like a failure. Okay. So that's the why. Inability, some sort of inadequacy. But you have to also explain why that doesn't work. You have to give the context. So if you're telling me that you went all the way to Russia because you got an internship, but when you had to take the test, you failed and they gave you 1 week and you were in your room studying and practicing, and, I have to hear you give me context. You have to tell me why it is that this thing did not work. Did you not have enough preparation? Did you not know what to expect? Were they expecting too much from you? Without the context, you're giving me a problem, but you're not competent enough to tie it together so I can see that whatever conclusion you reach to at the end, or however you decide to solve the problem, you're able to bridge the two. Because what happens is usually I see a why, I see a problem, and then suddenly I see the solution from nowhere. And then there's a conclusion how all you want to do is do this all of your life and do it for the whole world. And now you're so awesome because of that. So you have to give me context for me to understand what were the circumstances under which you lacked something or something was missing that you could not get what you wanted to get right now. This is very, very important. Without context, you might see me or somebody who reads your writing, they might ask you, so what? Okay, so you did this, you couldn't get it, and now you solved it. I'm not connecting. So what? So what? So what? So what? What's it to me? This is not really touching me at all. I feel this is a bit fake. It's just it's some writing there, some gibberish, okay, but there's no connection. So you have to explain, why doesn't that work? Whatever it is that you're trying, it's not working. Why doesn't it work? And then finally, you have to explain What is it that you did about it? So again, as I mentioned in the very beginning, and I actually repeated several times, I told you that's your story. So everything you wrote until now, with all this what and why and everything that I now said, unless you tell us what is it that you do about it, your story will still be sitting on one leg. Okay. And you don't want that, because that's a very wobbly situation. So what is it that you did about it? You were in that hotel, given 1 week, you buckled up, no sleep, no food. All you want to do is succeed. You put all of your mental faculties to work, and you were in anguish and despair. You were fighting the shame. You were fighting maybe some embarrassment. You were too afraid to call home and tell them what's happening. I'm just making things up. But this is how we flow. Okay, we sit down and we flow. So again, tell us what you did about it. And now from zero, you become the hero, because from nowhere, knowing how to solve the problem and tackle it, not knowing, why things are not working, or why, what brought you here, you're able to come up with something that you did about it. Now, the good thing about personal statement is that as long as you did something about the problem, you're safe. It doesn't mean that it has to work. So I do want to caution you. I do see sometimes writing that always leads to that final Disney lived happily ever after ending. And I'll talk about Disney, and there is really no better mastery of storytelling than Disney, as much as I am not a Disney fan. I have to give that to them, but be very careful, because that's not how real life works, and not everything is unicorns and fairy dust and starry nights, okay, and magic carpets, because maybe you did everything in your power and the outcome was still not successful. Does that mean that you gave up? No, absolutely. Will you tell them that? Yes, please do. But it doesn't mean that you were enjoying that happily ever after. So many stories about the robotics team failing, but finally getting the prize. Everything is beautiful. The water polo team fought and nearly lost, but finally, the last minute, they won. So that just again leads to a little bit of a fake writing. It's a little bit of made up stuff. And you are the hero as long as you know what to do, or you take action. So remember, the story is when you do something about the obstacle. It's not about you being the fancy prince at the end, or princess. It's not about how everything turned in your favor at the end, because it might not have. So say it as it is, and reiterate your character and your perseverance, but focus on what it is that you did about it, not so much on the final ending, because final ending is not in our hands. And we have to just kind of be honest that under any circumstance, I do my best. Under whatever life serves me, whatever lemons, I make a lemonade and a lemon pie. But do not think that you necessarily have to be the winner. So this brings me back to the moment when you sit down and you decide to write your essay. And you think and think and think very hard, and you're like, oh, gee, I got to tell a good story. I got to tell them a story when I succeeded, because I have to exemplify, how awesome of a success I am. And, you really, in that way, you might be missing a lot of good stories that you can tell about your character and your perseverance and your personality. In that desire to exemplify a good ending, you're sacrificing your personality. So it's not about the ending and the story and how life turned out for you, because you don't always have that ability to turn life 180 degrees, but you have the ability to show what you're made of in time of treacherous circumstances. And that's what you have to focus on. And again, that's why what you did about it comes to play. All right, so let's see if from everything I said until this point in time, you're able to give me 5 things that you will take away from everything I just now said, whether it is on how you brainstorm, to free flow, to the questions you might ask, something that stood out to you as essential in this 1 hour of me conversing with you, or me lecturing rather, that you will take away and you will be able to implement in your writing immediately. Okay, so let me see in the chat 5 things that are a takeaway for you from this conversation. And everything that I just now said until this point in the chat, give it to me 5 things. And then I'm getting ready with the next next talk about writing. So while you're getting ready to write, just to remind you, we talked about the difference between personal statement and statement of purpose. We talked about brainstorming, outline or not, looking at the prompts, what's the personal statement all about, how to connect on a personal level, deep writing from the gut, the questions that you can ask, what are the most important questions. So hopefully you'll be able to give me some good answers. I'm waiting for you to do that in the chat. And in the meantime, I'm checking to see if there's somebody else here waiting to join, but not able to. Okay, is Janvi here with us today? She's not. Okay, you should be able to type now. Okay, yes, if this is disabled for you, and then you should try here. Okay, for those of you who texted me that chat is disabled, I have sent you a message. Okay, yes. Not every story has to have a happy ending. Okay. Okay, excellent. Not so much center of attention. Excuse me. Not so much center of attention, Arushi. Excuse me, but the story is exactly only about you. It has to be about you. Yes, the story has to be about you. Yes, thank you. Which means if there's any, friends, family, no names, please, in a personal statement, never. Okay, if the chat is disabled, try now. Type here. Okay, someone is saying person. Okay, you have to relate to the person reading your essay. Does not have to have a happy ending. Yes, you don't have to be humble and have to write it all about you. You don't have to be humble and have to write it all about you. Yes, the personal statement is about you as a person. So what's the question of humility? There's really no question. You're telling a story. This is just like us telling a story about Aladdin and making him like, oh, he's super shy, chewing on his fingers there on the side and not taking any action. I mean, we love the character because, he was brave and brazen to to do whatever abominable things were needed to be done so he can get what he wants, once he understood what it is that he wants. So, remember that. So what is it that you really want? You go after it with all of your might, and it's not about being shy at all. And if you were the one that is shy in the beginning of the story, and you found out, hey, this is the obstacle for me. The obstacle is that I'm not able to get out of my head, and I'm constantly looking at things and perceiving them in a certain way, and I'm judging, and now I'm thinking of myself, and I'm constantly putting myself in a spot where I'm so harshly judging my own personality, and I'm expecting so much from me. And how was I able to step out of that and stop being my own enemy? How was I able to, where did the perspective come? What enabled me to do? Well, there must have been some circumstance that you met, and you all of a sudden discovered, hold on a second. You either discovered that you're better than the rest, or you're very good, or you got some qualities that you were able to dig yourself out of the ditch. And then you look around and you're like, it doesn't really matter how good or bad I am. It's not about that at all. We're all fallible humans. But what did they just now do in this circumstance? What is it that I did that I can apply that to future circumstances that helps me understand this better? So, and that really happens with some of us. This could be about, there's so many. I've had a student who wrote about inability to speak in front of an audience, and all he really wanted to do is speech and debate and be a debater, but he had that crippling shyness, inability to stand and speak and say anything at the moment. And he was so brilliant, and if he had to sit down and write it, but the minute he saw the audience, the minute he felt that he's being judged, the minute he started hearing his own voice speak out loud, and even though he was reading it for most of the part, he felt completely inadequate, completely crippled by that, and very upset and angry with himself. And he will be constantly in that internal anguish and despair and search for answers. And everything seemingly was fine on the outside, but on the inside there was so much brewing going on, lots of bubbling going on. So he was able to sit down and describe that inner anxiety that he was experiencing, and how he was able to get out of his own way and overcome. And there was a lot of internal monologue. So some of these stories are actually the best, because we sometimes we're our worst enemies, and it's not so much about what the world serves us, but it's about us and how we respond, and how we are able to be our own friends. So understanding that, and overcoming that internal quality, that is also how we chisel out strong character. So it's really, really important to be able to describe your inner emotions as well, very simply. You don't have to say it in a big and fancy way. Okay, I did not see answers from everyone. Okay, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure why for some of you are able to respond and others are not. So. Okay. All right, well, let's move on. Let's move on, and let's talk a little bit about now that we're very clear on what it is that we can do. Let's talk a little bit about the personal statement, and should you be mentioning the special degree or the major that you're trying to pursue. So I have been asked this question, and I do want to address that specifically about the personal statement on the common application or the coalition. So no, you really do not have to state that specifically or outright. You do not. you can certainly hint that in your, explaining your interests. And I'll give you an example in just a bit how you can do that lightly. But you do not have to state, therefore, I'm trying to pursue mechanical engineering because it has always been, my desire to see that I can, the other. Okay. So no, you do not have to state that. Please don't. In fact, try to hint that. Tell them about your interests. Tell them how you always, tinkered with cars maybe, or you always had that proclivity to take the latest gadget dad brought home and secretly undo it under the bed and break it. And you broke a lot of things before you can fix them, or something like that. But don't just straight away say, unless you're writing a statement of purpose, again, when you're pursuing your postgraduate, when you have to mention all these professional, maybe accolades and things that you have come across that show you as a professional already. But here on this level, you can definitely hint and explain what you're all about. But let me tell you something, and I know sometimes the question comes specifically from students who are trying to pursue engineering, any kind of field of engineering, because you might be thinking, I don't want to write about my passion for music or how I've been for so many years in an orchestra and I've traveled the world. And I don't want to make this about violin or piano when I'm actually trying to pursue mechanical engineering, because I don't want to be seen as a softie who cares more about music than mathematics or, coding or whatnot. Just because you're applying for computer science, it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily talk about your coding. They will take a look at your 10 or 20 activities and everything else that you turn in your common application. They will very well understand where you have spent most of your time. But if in your personal statement, you have to give them a look at what kind of person are you outside of this coding and whatever else that you have done. And what if all you think about is mathematics and physics? Well, maybe you're one of those people that does that. Well, then tell them something that is perhaps mixed with your passion, let's say, for music. So if you're pursuing computer science or data science, but you're a pianist or violinist or, guitarist or whatever it is that, maybe you're a tennis player or, try to connect the two together. I had last year, there was a student who was doing swimming, competitive swimmer, and he was going into computer science. And we were able to merge his swimming along with mathematics, statistics, and computer science without saying straight away, blow by blow, I want to be a computer scientist and all I think about is math. But as he was swimming, he was literally sitting and calculating very methodically how many strokes he has to do, all the time calculating. Everything was for him statistically measured before he even entered the pool. With every competition, with every training practice, with every meal he ate, everything was statistics in his mind, as everything was measured, calculated, mathematically formulated. So we wrote a swimming essay about a swimmer, him, but it was given through the mind of a mathematician, someone who constantly calculated and planned in such a way that he was a successful swimmer. And it was really fantastic, actually. So if you have these seemingly different talents, make sure that you're able to tell a story where you merge them, because music is math, truly. So if you're a musician and if you're planning to go and do anything STEM related, you can very well merge the two and speak about, counting beats and counting notes and connect that to some sort of mathematical equation. And usually these are the most brilliant sort of personal statements, I would say. There's some schools that specifically ask if you can take, this was last year, I believe, or the year before that, it was in one of the Yale's competitions, science competitions conducted by the school, was asking this kind of prompt. And then the same prompt that Yale had came back as the University of Florida at Gainesville. It was one of their supplemental essay prompts. If you can combine two seemingly very different topics and studies, and if you can combine them, what will they be and what will you achieve? So they really want to see interdisciplinary study and that you're able to apply concepts. So this is not about the bookish knowledge that you get from school. This is about deeper understanding on a conceptual level, that you really are able to look around you and see the world made of physics. Physics is not a study. Physics is life. Everything that you do, the way you speak, move your hands, walk, everything is based on physics. Are you living it every single day? If you're saying that this is going to be your major, or if you're relating mathematics with it, you know, every day, every minute, you have to be seeing it, thinking it, breathing it, living it. You don't have to, but I'm just saying that it will be nice to, instead of saying it, to demonstrate that and to show it instead. Like I said, as I speak, if you want to ask questions that I can answer at the end, or I can simultaneously answer, that will be very helpful, because I do want you to tell me what's on your mind. I don't want you to sit here and listen to this and think, yeah, this is great, this is wonderful, you know, 0 to hero, yes, that's fantastic. But when I sit down to write, and I want to write something that is so specific to me, you know, it just all turns down to ashes, and I don't know how to relate, you know, A and B and C together. So ask. All right, so I do want to speak a little bit about something called method writing. And I really hope to be able to get to some of the more advanced techniques today. I'm not going to be able to teach everything in depth, because each one of them probably requires a couple of hours of explanation, but at least I'll mention that so you're aware of what's possible. And if you should be able to write notes and retain it, you can even attempt to do it. So what is method writing? Method writing is really one of the most advanced ways of writing that has been employed by some great writers of classic literature and cinema. So there's some big school of writing that teach method writing, and method writers have been studied continuously because method writing really translates into natural writing. Again, what does that mean? It means that you sit down and you flow without having any worries about style, techniques, voice, me, you, everything is just out the door. You just kind of flow and put it down first and foremost without any planning. So why is this very difficult? This is the simplest way of doing it, and it's the most difficult way of doing it. It is very difficult to do it is because you have to have that deep imagination to be able to chunk what you're saying at the moment in scenes. It's almost like if you're looking at, you know, your life that you're describing, if that suddenly turns into a movie in your head. And when you're describing each scene, you're writing it in chunks, in like outbursts, and you're seeing the first scene of what it is, you're stepping out, it's all 3D literally, and you're writing about yourself again in first person perspective, but you're able to see this as a scene, and not, it's vivid and it's color, but you don't have that you know, internal attachment to it. It's just a chunk out of the big scene, out of the big story. And again, this is really difficult because first you have to understand that there cannot be any forced feeling here. And the feeling will just have to be very simple and very real, the way you felt it. And what this really means is that when somebody's reading this kind of writing, they need to understand that they need to see it not as a writing, but as just a simple story that is flowing. In other words, they should be believing you, but it's not about, is your story believable, but it is about, are you writing in such a way that you can suspend disbelief? Now think about what I'm saying. When you watch, you know, fiction or science fiction stories or whatnot, you know, when you're watching a movie, very often you know that, you know, what you're seeing is not true. I mean, you're in a movie theater, you're watching a movie, it cannot be real, for God's sake, right? But you're still believing it, and you're still putting yourself sometimes in the shoes of the main character, and it just feels like you're not existing in real time and circumstance, you forget about yourself for a while. Why are you forgetting about yourself? Is because you're existing in a state of suspended disbelief. So the disbelief that you will usually have is suspended. It's not existing anymore. How were they so good that they were able to make you suspend all disbelief, and suspend all prejudice? All that prejudice and good thinking that you're practicing every single day, that rationality is gone. And suddenly you're not only believing it, but you're part of it. And you might even be fantasizing to be the real character. So that is very, very difficult to do. How is that achieved? It is achieved through what I just now described, method writing, where you're very, very simple and very real, okay? And there's no forced writing. I'll give you an example of forced writing in just a little bit so you'll understand how we all make that mistake. The forced narrative, anytime you read something and you're like, yeah, it's just me reading it. Some of these books are very hard, right? From school that they ask you to read it. Why? Because they're just forced writing. The whole purpose behind those books is to push forward a moral or some sort of agenda. And you just all somehow have to swallow that. And it's so difficult, right? So, but then there's stories where you're watching and you don't even know how the time is flying. So there's forced writing and there's the method writing, which is seamless and very easy. The narrative is just the pages really turn themselves. So usually when you write your personal narrative and you edit it a couple of times and you go through it and you read it out loud in your voice and you're able to catch some problems, slowly it starts to shape up into some sort of writing. I have to warn you, do not be perfectionist, because you're not going to have, you might have a good story, you're just not going to have an amazing story. I have to tell you just why, because you lack experience at this age. It will really be very difficult to see an amazing story, fantastic story. You might be able to have a good, decent story with a little bit of practice and all these tips, and if you apply these tips at the end, really. So it's all, so instead of going for something fantastic and just aiming for, oh, this is just going to be mind-blowing, focus on being authentic and just focus on sounding very much you, okay? So writing in natural voice is difficult, and that's what you will have to practice. That's why I usually ask for many drafts, because we want to see where are you most authentic, which story are you telling that is most real to you. And when I work with you, you know, I ask you, we have draft A, B, and C, or 1, 2, 8, 3. Where do you feel in your gut most comfortable that just really this story feels like, yes, it's me. And if, you know, somebody read it, they can put your name on top because it just sounds very much like your voice. Okay, it's not stressed, it's not forced. Just like imagine you're sitting down and you're writing a shopping list, you know. So are you going to be stressed out if you write a shopping list? No, right? Because you don't care. And it's going to be just you. You love mayonnaise and big buckets, and you'll put it down and you will not be worried that somebody's judging your love for mayonnaise, right? So just like that, you know, that's the approach. Be calm, be simple. You have to be ready to write a bad story first before you can write a good story. And before you can write a fantastic story. Lots of bad writing will have to happen. So if you haven't started, please do. Do not expect to write one draft and have that first draft as your final draft. Even after many edits, you might have to pick something else. So please do not relax. Start and come up with several different drafts, several different stories, so you can gain the feeling of where you're most authentic, okay? You have to have the willingness to fail and get rid of the idea of being perfect, and get rid of the idea that you can just rattle out something and people will have to believe you and you don't have to be vulnerable. If that's how you feel, and if you have difficulty being vulnerable, start practicing, because there's really not going to be any writing that's going to move the needle on to favor you if your writing is not vulnerable. This is the hardest part, because we do not like to be vulnerable. We do not like to be judged. In fact, everything we do is to avoid judgment. The way we dress and walk and talk and all the fancy study and learning and all the polishing that we take through life is so we are normal and not judged or misjudged, so we're seen as something that we want to be. And here you almost have to like take out and say, here, I got these demons and that's what I'm fighting, and this is my problem, and this is what I'm going to do about it. So if you're afraid of being vulnerable, sit down and ask yourself this question. I'm working so hard to not be judged, or when I'm judged, to be the winner in a situation, and now I have to let my guard down. So this is kind of really important. And even for your age, being so young, there's so many things that are internally happening in you, and you're at the stage when you're growing and when you're finding your character. So for you, all that turmoil should really be exemplified in some possible way. Okay, maybe it's the rite of passage, you growing up, maturing, figuring out who you are, discovering that your teachers and parents are not the smartest people in the world, that we all make mistakes, whatever it is. Okay, so I want you to think about approaching your writing from nothing, beginning from nothing, and seeing where your writing wants to go, but stay kind of grounded and understand that you will have to be in the middle of it. So the biggest problem with forced writing is when people are afraid to fail and they just produce something superficial, that it just rattles out a whole bunch of things that they did, and a whole bunch of clubs that they participated in, a whole bunch of nonprofits foundations that they donated, and all that stuff. And really, that's just a resume. So what are some exercises that you can do so you can learn how to bear your words to others? So there's, some of you might have heard of Stanislavski. He was one of the most amazing when it comes to cinema and theater and writing. He used a word called concepts. Okay, so I want you to kind of write that word down and think about what this means. What does the word concepts means in writing? This is another line that I'll probably repeat a couple of times because it's really important. Okay, your focus should really not be on the story. Your focus should be on the concept. What does concept mean? Again, I'll give you an example. The most sort of trivial writing that admissions see time and time again: robotics. Okay, and what's happening during a robotics competition, and how the team is failing, and you come in a red cape and you rescue everyone. The judges love you, you're the winner. This story is told by 9 out of 10 people, right? So let's take the most boring story and we think about, how do we flip it on its head? Well, forget about the story. Forget about what happens. You're the person in the red cape that comes and saves the day. Fine, we'll live with that boring situation. Now, can we think about this boring story and think about the concept in it? What would be the concept in a story like that? Can you take a story like that and turn it on its head by exemplifying the concept and still having it make some difference and being memorable, even if it is so many times told over and again, 9 out of 10 times? Any ideas? What will be the concept here? Do we understand how to look for concepts? Give it to me in the chat. What would be the concept here? Do not focus on the story and who saved the day. You do not focus on the story. This could be about anything, right? Focus on the concept. How can you learn to look for concepts even in the most banal, boring, worn out topics? No one wants to try it out? Okay, so I have someone texting, someone really smart figured out to text because the chat is probably disabled for them. I apologize. You can text me, my friends, 408-373-8953, 373-8953. You can text me your answers. That's perfectly fine. Let's not be limited by the chat here on Zoom. So somebody's asking, will you consider the moral of the story? So let's be a little bit careful, because moral would be Moral usually means what's the author trying to convey to the audience and teach them from experience. Don't be sounding preachy. That's another thing I was going to talk about. Sounding preachy is like, and you know, this is how life sometimes go, and we must be willing to change. We must be willing to take our difficulties and turn them into positive experience, because not everything will always be our choice. And as one time Abraham Lincoln said, oh, that's preaching. So be very careful. But I see what you're probably trying to get to by saying moral. So a concept, you know, not focusing on you coming in on the story, being the savior in a, you know, flying carpet and saving the team here. The concept really you have to move back and figure out what kind of qualities will it take to turn a bad situation into a good situation. It could be anything, robotics, swimming, no matter what, okay? Anything that you're going through, friendships, family, quabble, whatever. What kind of quality, what is the concept that I'm trying to convey here is the personal qualities that I bring in, okay? That is the concept. You know, think of the concept as the underlying sort of spirit that makes things happen. Think about it as what animates the situation. Any situation that you're in the middle of is animated by something, by some feeling, the desire to help, to be better, to, you know, to really contribute to society or whatnot. So that concept of you being the better version of yourself is what came handy, and you jumped in and you saved the situation. So instead of focusing on the how things were not going, you know, well here so much, or, you know, how you were the hero, focus on what was the driving force behind you wanting to do what you did, and then finally you did it. So a paragraph should be dedicated to the power that led you, the force that led you to do what you did. And that is the concept, the energy behind the good deed that you're able to see through at the end. So someone else here is mentioning something. I just want to see it. Internal experience and action that the main character took. Okay, so the concept is the internal experience, the qualities that the character has to be able to lead to that experience, to be able to lead to him or her taking action to get out of the experience, because that's a problem. Remember, we have a problem we're solving. And somebody else here is texting, you know, something I really want to see because I think it's the correct thing. Would it also be how it impacted you? Yes, the concept really is also, at the end of the day, the concept is about the how and, you know, answering these questions. So the questions they gave you earlier, they have to be here. Whatever it is that you're writing about, you know, they really have to be here. So just keep that in mind. That doesn't change. Okay. So excellent. Fantastic. All right, let's move on. So do not focus on what's going on. It could be anything. You could just be sitting on your living room and having a cup of tea or coffee with your mom and going through your life and having so much blame in your heart and just feeling very, very decomposed because this is not how you imagined your life to go, and no one seems to be getting it, and you're having a hard time telling people around you that this is not what you want and you're headed in a different direction. That is catharsis. Okay, that is a clash. Why? Because, you know, we're dealing with people and circumstances. Or maybe you just now discovered that I had a story like that a few years back. The girl just came back from home. She had decided to go back to yoga and meditating because she was slipping out at school and she needed an internal peace, very competitive high school. And she had just picked up a book about yoga, and she was deciding on how this is going to save her grades, save everything. And she enters her living room and she finds out that her mom has a debilitating depression, that she has been diagnosed, and now she has to be a caretaker in addition to everything else that she's going through. So now when she was already presenting one problem, she piggybacked another bigger problem onto that. So good luck getting yourself out of that situation now, right? So what is the concept? What is the concept here? How was she able, what kind of personal characteristics was she able to discover in herself she didn't know existed until now? And all of a sudden, because life presented her with these circumstances, she found out, oh, I have this and this and this and this that will dig me out of this situation. And in comparison to the care I have to offer and the strength I have to find, getting my grades up and meditating every day is piece of cake. So the first problem sort of negated itself out and fell off. And the second problem became the first in the first line. So you have to play in your mind with all these situations, and you have to think, who am I? What have I got? What do I really want? Well, maybe you're just sitting in front of the mirror and you're imagining that you're speaking in front of thousands of people and you're a very shy person, and maybe you're practicing. Tell that story very simply, okay? So this is what a concept is. So again, I want you to write down here something that really should stay with you for writing and for, many things in life. Be willing to fail. And now, because I'm teaching about writing, be willing to fail in your writing. Do not be afraid to fail, because successful writers and successful people, but writers, because we speak about writing, they're not afraid to be vulnerable, and they're not afraid to fail in their first draft, second draft, third draft, not working out, not my real voice, not happening. Okay, I'm not authentic. I'm just writing the way I've been taught to write to get an A, right? So the failure is the evidence that you're not good at it, which is great, because once you find that out, now you can build up and you can become successful. So it's not about having the perfect draft, but it's about, and it's not about, oh, I'm failing, I'm not good at this is not going, no, it's about, okay, I'm willing to fail. I'll interpret failure in a very different way. To me, failure really means that from here, once I fail, I can only get better. And once I get really good at failing, then there's really no problem, because what can really faze me from here on now? Absolutely nothing. I'm good at failing, so now I can get up and get better at what it is that I'm doing. So do not be afraid of criticism. I know sometimes when I give feedback, I'm direct, because if we don't have much time, we better get the work done. But I'm trying to be mindful of feelings too. But sometimes when things are not working out, they're not working out. I will point out something about the personal statement and identity, which is also very important, but let's get there a little bit. So what are the 5 voices all of you need to know, so you're able to really get to the craft of the thing? So remember the method I was teaching. Now this is a little bit kind of hard for you to assimilate, because it takes you from the questions they gave you that are kind of a simple way to start writing to the next thing, like, oh, how do I sound authentic? I don't even know, because my voice is not my voice. My voice is my teacher's voice, my parents' voice, somebody else is constantly telling me what to do in my head, and I have no voice yet. So that you need to clear out. Okay, so that's difficult, the method writing, the coming from the gut. But you should know the 5 voices. Why? Because when you're writing, you should also check yourself at the end and think, am I able to mix these voices when I'm writing? So at least my writing is not boring, because who wants to read a boring personal story, right? You will be just shoved somewhere and forgotten. So even if your draft is terrible, it should not be boring. So whatever it is that you do, please stand out. Stand out. You're all very original individuals that no one is like you. That is such a miracle. So try to find what makes you a miracle. And if that is so difficult, at least have a surprise moment there in your writing somewhere, okay? So how do we do that? The 5 voices. All right, so there are actually 4. Voices. I will be able to send you some pointers as to where you can learn more about writing if you're interested. There are many resources One is pretty easy to find. It's a PDF, about 2 pages, no problem, very fast to read. But there's some other really good writings. And I have some teachers that have taught me and continue teaching me because I'm very much interested in this. So I always try to add some knowledge to my daily endeavors when it comes to that. And I can share what it is that I read and what books I keep on my shelf. But if you're interested, if not, I can just tell you. So the 4 voices that you really need to know when you write, the first one is your straight talk. It's called straight talk. You write your personal statement using straight talk. Easy peasy, right? How do you do that? Straight talk is writing how you talk and how you think on a day-to-day basis. You should have a little bit of that in your personal statement. Sometimes it's even good to start with the straight talk, okay? This is not your deep voice and being vulnerable and all that kind of stuff. No, this is just your basic, this is very basic way of how you think and how you live. So it could be like, so I got up, and once I realized that there was a fire in the house, I knew I had to grab my dad's picture and run away. This was the one thing that was going to give me energy to no matter what happened to me. All the rest of my belongings, forget it. I couldn't care less. Laptops, coins, books, everything I've accumulated for the past 16 years of my life meant nothing. But this picture was going to be the highlight of my future. That's a straight talk. And I just came up with this on the spot. You can come up with this on the spot too, I guarantee you. Okay. All you have to do is just relax and think and say it as it is. So your writing should have a straight talk a little bit, because when you're engaging in a conversation with someone you don't know, this is the easiest way to be relatable. You're not going to sit down and be deep from the gut and go, that feeling when we conversed and when you said this to me, I was not able to sleep. You're not going to go there because you'll scare everybody off straight off the bat. You want to start with the street talk and be more about what's happening and the prices and the economy and just chit chat. Okay. In your personal statement, this could be anything. Just the way I now gave you an example about this photo that I saved. So what was going to happen next? Deep writing. I was going to go straight from my gut and explain how my life shattered when I discovered my dad had passed away. There was no one to teach me anything. I felt unprotected, exposed, bare. The world was out there to get me. I was never going to see him again. What is even worse, the last time we met, we ended it with a fight and I left for college. So now I'm deep. And now I'll slow down my voice. I'll get softer and I'll get very basic. I will not use any big words. My sentences will be choppy. My sentences will be simple, easy to assimilate, easy to understand, fast to read, so I can convey the emotion. It's just like when I'm telling you a secret, how I'm lowering my voice, I'm getting more intense. And I really want to tell you how that felt. I felt like I was at the bottom, I was on the ground, and there was no getting up. So the same way you can start with the street talk and shift the emotion immediately to something very, very deep and bury yourself and tell them how that friend that left you left a scar and you can never trust anyone again, right? You see that? So from the straight talk, you probably guessed it, the second kind of voice is reflective voice. So reflective voice, you can think of a bit of a ornate style of writing. You can think of Faulkner, you can think of Walt Whitman, you can think of some of the masters out there. They reflect a lot. They're really aware of who they are. They know their emotions. They have looked at these emotions, bare hands, squeezed it out and taken out all the sweat. And they know what they're made out of, okay? So these reflective kind of writing can be very, very handy, especially when you're trying to convey something that has to do with your major now, right? Because when you're reflective, if you're telling me that at heart you're an artist, and if you're telling me that, to you, that depression that you felt was so, it destroyed your hope. But then when you see colors and when you see the brightness of green and yellow, and when you put it on your canvas And when your mom walks in the house and you show her you show what you have done, and her face lights up, and she's been just at work for 8 hours, fighting the world, but this one piece of art brought a smile on her face you've never seen for days, even though a little tired. That right there is a reflective voice, okay? Because now you're looking at things and you're pulling each thing, you're pulling strings out of each sentence, and you're knitting and you're making more and more and more and more and more. All right, so straight talk, reflective voice. Now we come to the oldest technique known to men, which is something you're very well familiar with, but you probably never paid attention or no one told you. All right, I just checked the time, so you can see how much time I got. I can go on for another 2 hours, my friends. I love this. There's so much to teach. So the oldest technique it's found in the Bible, and it's found in Abraham Lincoln's speeches. The Gettysburg Address, 207 words, but it's remembered by the entire world, and it's repeated all the time, easy to memorize by even fifth graders. Also, Martin Luther King, okay, everybody knows this speech. I have a dream, yada, yada, yada. I have a dream, yada, yada, yada. I have a dream, yada, yada, yada. So nobody remembers yada, yada. Everybody remembers I have a dream, right? Why? Because this is the technique of repeating in a very melodious way. The repetition is the one that brings in, you can repeat it up to 5 times. This is what brings out the melody, and it makes it memorable, and it just kind of sinks it in, makes it sink into your soul. So it is used by all the greatest and the best, right? So this is really one thing that you can apply to your personal statement by repeating parts of your writing. And I knew that I will never be back again to my birth town. I knew that I had to get used to this new school where no one seemed to like me. I knew that this is going to be my new life. And from knowing came my determination that I have to make it work for me. There, done. Okay. So repeating it a couple of times, just reiterating it brings out melody, which usually is kind of hard to bring out. So speaking of being authentic, using these techniques is going to make you sound natural. It's going to make you sound authentic, even if it is difficult for you. All right, and the last one, which I already kind of mentioned, that's the deep voice, where you use, you're being reflective and being personal at the same time. Actually, that's the 5th one. The 4th one is when you are writing total nonsense. Okay, and this sounds a little bit out of pocket, but it really is. And not all writing needs to be all substance and substance. There needs to be some pockets of that. Okay, think about that. Fancy schmancy words a little bit, and a little bit sounding, preachy, and a little bit annoying, and a little bit of cliched. Okay, intentionally. So this one is kind of hard to bring in, but you can think of it also being a little humorous and a little bit self-deprecating in some ways. All right, so just be very careful that if you don't apply all this I told you, you can apply a little bit of it. Just stay away from being boring. Anytime you feel like your writing turns into boring, repetitive, monotonous, pontificating, where you're just focused on one thing and yada, 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 change the tone immediately. Bring in some immediate comic relief or something that breaks up that monotony. All right, so now how to spot a bad writing. So if you wrote something and you ask the questions and you go through all the voices and you're looking at it, how do you know if it's bad or if you actually have a story? Before I continue though, I do want to ask if you have any questions from everything I said, because I know it's quite a bit. So if you have something in mind where you're wondering about your specific situation of how do you make it work, if nothing of what I said applies to your situation, I have shared with all of you a book that has a ton of personal statements, and they're all color coded, and I've broken it up so you can see the little sections. I did that intentionally to make sure that, and I did that right after our first meeting because I wanted you to have examples of personal statements. I try to stay away from giving too many examples because somebody else's writing, when you read it, that is already done, finished, polished, edited. And when you read that, I don't want you thinking, oh, wow, I'll never be able to write like this, because that's the final work. So I don't really like to stay away from that a little bit. But at the same time, I want you to see what the final products might look like for you too, so you can have some examples. But if everything I said is far from what you are trying to achieve, I want you to ask some questions right now so I make sure that I address it and your time is worthwhile spent here. So I'll just give you like 30 seconds or 40 seconds. If there's something in your mind where you're thinking, that's all great, but I still don't know where I stand. Maybe you can ask now. And you can text, or you can raise your hand, or you can text me here, or 3738953. Any questions? Great, very good question. I'll answer this and then we'll move on. Okay, this is the intermission. How important is it to tie your personal statement back to your major in some way? Okay, so I'm going to flip this. So maybe how important is it to have your major tied into your personal statement? Assuming that your personal statement is all this we talked about, problem story, deciding to do something about it, who are you, what do you want, what are you going to do? That's the personal statement. So now we have the major here. So how do we, sprinkle that on top of everything? I assume that's what you're asking. So it is important. I will not say it's important to necessarily state the major, like I already explained, but it is important to hint and exemplify that how are you a good fit for that major. Again, if I'm planning to major in data science, statistics, computer science, engineering, or any of the STEM related fields, not to group them, but I definitely will be the kind of person that will be absolutely found in my mind of I'm a thinker in terms of planning and mathematics. For me, things are less spontaneous and more planned. I'm more interested in, seeing things in order and in a formulaic way. To me, calculating events and wondering about certain paradoxes comes naturally. So I do want to let them know about that. I do. I will mull over a paradox over many days. I'll research it. I will want to know more about it. I'll give all these math problems to my family and watch them fail and there. So I don't have to necessarily tell them that, yeah, I'm definitely going to study mathematics. That's my major. Okay, write that down. No, I don't. But in my personality, I'll exemplify my passion for it. Or if I'm into, let's say, physics or, engineering in some way, or, in my mind, I'm constantly constructing things. Even as I am going about my day, I'm experimenting with physics. To me, I don't have to open the window every day and wonder, oh, is gravity working today or not? Obviously, I don't have to test that, but I'm constantly absorbed in, what if, and, everyone is assuming that, this is the reality. But what if I never came to know about some laws of physics and I start from zero? What will be the first thing I think? What questions am I asking myself? What am I observing? How am I connecting that to what I know? And what if I don't know how to calculate, some events or, think about some probabilities? And I'll be wondering, maybe I'll write about something and I'll be like, well, this was luck, or there's no such luck. And what are probabilities? And then what is luck? And can I calculate that? Is there a formula for luck? Is there a formula for love? Can I come up with it? So I'm going to say that because that's what really I'm passionate about. If I'm passionate about history and I want to be a pol sci major, or even if not, I'm constantly Googling the names of all historical figures and I'm obsessed about their life. I want to know everything that they did. Why did they do it? What were their quirks? They were human beings, but why did they take that decision for that specific, war or whatnot? Okay. So I'm absorbed with that. No matter what's happening to me, my passion cannot be hidden. Okay. That is my shining crown, and I will make sure that I tell you about it. So did that help? Okay, if there's more such questions, please ask. This is really important to me because I don't want to stand here and lecture forever about techniques that you will not remember. I hope you do, and I hope you apply. Just try what I told you about the questions and you'll see how the story gets written much faster. Think about the street voice I just now told you and practice it. Think about being authentic and writing about nothing and how something comes up, and have fun with it. Because otherwise, trust me, something will come out and you will turn something in, but you all deserve for the hard work you've put together up to this point to hear this. So you have this knowledge. What do you do with it? That's a different story. So please ask. Okay, so there's no other question, I guess. All right, so let's bring this home. Okay, there are two other really advanced techniques that I will not be able to teach at length. I have made a video about one of them, and it's called the braided essay. It is a very difficult kind of writing, but I do encourage those of you who are applying to advanced Ivy League or Ivy League-like schools to attempt it. Even if it is not part of your personal statement, there are many other opportunities where maybe in a supplemental essays or somewhere, depending on the school, you can tell that story. If you're applying to NYU, they have Why NYU question, which presents itself beautifully for the braided essay. The braided essay is exactly that. So you can think about a braid, and then you have the main story runs through from top to bottom of you doing this, and this is what's happening. And then you're braiding around the main story, you're around that continuous flow, you're braiding another problem. And that could be in the form of reminiscing in the past or imagining the future, having some sort of maybe feeling of something, it doesn't have to be doom and gloom to get the attention, but another story is going alongside of the main story that's happening. There are very few personal essays written like that. I have to tell you, it's difficult, but I would say challenge yourself, do something a little bit, push yourself to, now is the time to push yourself to achieve something slightly more exceptional than what you will otherwise deliver. So this is another strategy. Again, just to give you an example, and I think I might have given that example before, but I'll just repeat it. If I were, I remember briefly what I had given as an example. It might come out differently this time, but I'm trying to improvise. So I'm at my grandma's attic and I'm looking through her clothes because they always smell a little misty, but they have that history in them. And I'm always very curious of what did she wear, way back when. And I am so related to her because I feel like I have her eyes, I have her personality. I want to know her more. I never got a chance. I'm looking at her closet and I see these 2 black shoes and I want to wear them. And this is me. This is what's happening right now. And now I bring in something else. I bring in the story where as soon as I put on the shoes, I remember something. I remember how I was standing in front of the jury and how I was trying to present my speech. And I was so shaken. I felt so unsure. I forgot everything. All my months of practice and everything, my future was kind of hinging on me winning at that time, all went to nothing. And I felt so embarrassed. What would she think if she saw me? I looked at the black shoes on my feet And I was taken all the way to the times when she had to run away and escape an invasion in her state, and she had to pack everything and run for her life. She had to find this perseverance and the strength and the tenacity to succeed, to live, so there will be future generations. I am a summum bonum of so many people that have lived before me, and they have had to experience similar struggle and shame and despair, but they were able to make it somehow. I don't know their story, but I know mine. And I know today that I will be able to overcome standing in front of that jury a second time. Life gives us second chances. And I'll be able to speak straight from my heart and not freeze, because I'm not just me. And this is not only my story, but it is the story of all of those who came before me. I'm one with many faces. I'm one with many stories to tell. And like that. So this is what just now happened. I told the story about me on the attic and digging through stuff. And then I told the story about, of course, this will be much longer, right? I just told the story about the black shoes and my grandma. I gave them all about my identity. I gave them where I come from. I told them about my passion speaking. I told them about my insecurities. And now, of course, if I had to sit down and write it, I'll write a lot more about this. So I'll have stories going through, and they all relate to the same concept, right? So once I found the concept, I was able to tie everything in a knot, and it did not look like the stories that disconnected my grandma running and how do I connect this and where's my transition, and none of that, right? So it just kind of became a little bit easier. But I knew the concept. The concept is that I'm not alone and I exist, but I represent so many others, and I owe to the past and to the future to be the best I can. And where do I get that strength from? I get it from what's been given to me, and maybe not articulated, but felt as an experience. Okay. All right. So let's move on. We have just a few more minutes, my friends. I do want to wrap it up. And I do want to say one more thing. That is, well, I can say a lot more about the structure of the sentence, but I've seen that, so I want to caution you. So there are two things I want to talk about before I end it. And I know I'm just going to wrap it up quickly, but if I could articulate and explain a lot more, I definitely would have. But please take this and try to absorb it. All right. The concept that I talked about, again, is very important. Just like I repeated everything again, I want to summarize this before I move forward and end it. The concept is going to be, just like somebody said, moral. It's not really moral, but let's just think about it as close to that as possible, just so you can understand how important this is for the substance, for the premise on which your story will be sitting. So if you have to think of this, okay, spotting a bad writing, for example, how do you read it? And then you think, okay, how do I know if this is bad writing, right? How do I tell? This is my story. It's my baby. To me, it's all perfect. Like I tell my students, I'm proofread, look at your grammar. I did, everything's perfect. You look in, oh my, it's just disaster, right? So how do you spot it? First of all, get rid of all adverbs that you have, okay? Just get rid of the adverbs. They're not your friend, they're your enemies. If you find lots of adverbs in your writing, this should be a clue to you that you need to work on your writing. Sprinkle adjectives, remove adverbs. If you have many adverbs, that means you have very weak verbs. And if your verb is weak, which is the action of the sentence, then we really have to look into a little bit deeper as to why my verbs, that the ones that carry the action, are not telling anything substantial, right? Okay, so get rid of the adverbs. The next thing, when you look at this any story, XYZ story, I wanted you to think of this. If your story is bad, okay, for lack of a better word, that means that we don't have any writing that transforms from within. There's no transformation. It's just information. But information is not going to touch us. Transformation is what we're looking for when we want to read and learn from others, right? So think about it this way. I'm just going to give you an example. Here's a story. It's my birthday and I have a cake. I was hiding the birthday cake. Maybe it's a surprise. I don't know. Now I want you to think about this and remove the birthday cake from the sentence. Okay, just get rid of it. Now, what are you left with? You're left with, I was hiding. I was hiding. Why was I hiding? What was the problem? I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I had done something bad. I'm a bad person. Okay. A bad person equals I'm being stuck. I'm being stuck in this situation. I don't know what to do. That's the problem. Okay. There's some resistance. There's something needs to be done now. I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. Something needs to happen to get me out of there. Some thoughts needs to happen. Something needs to hit me here. Okay. So I'm stuck. And now, when you think of this sequence, I want you to come to the end when, oh, I'm stuck. And you think, now for you to get yourself unstuck, you have to come to the dreaded exercise of internalizing and associating. You have to go through internalization and association. And this is where the feelings will have to start flowing. So this was just a kind of an example about a sentence and how you take out some of it. Why we took out the birthday cake is because that was a crutch. Okay, so if you're telling me, and there was the robotics competition and we were not prepared. Take out robotics competition. What are you left with? We were not prepared. Why were you not prepared? We procrastinated. Why did you procrastinate? We didn't know what to do. We were lazy. Name the problems. Oh, okay. So you didn't know what to do. You lacked knowledge. You did not get it. You were lazy and you slipped in your deadlines, whatever the situation might be. Okay. This sounds negative, but I'm just giving you an example. By the way, don't be too negative. Okay. You have to take your reader out of the ditch. Don't let them be there because nobody wants to be left in the ditch suffering. Give them something to hold on to, right? So now you have to come up with, okay, now internalize and associate and see how from this here where you did this and this and this and this, how you can get yourself out of there. What is it that you can do? How can you present the concept? What concept will this lie on? The concept of, and you name it. Okay. All right. I hope this was helpful so far. Last word about the structure of the sentence. Many of you begin your sentence with participle phrase. I'm not going to ask you if you know what that is, because I'm pretty sure that I might have to do another 2-hour class on grammar only. But I know that there's some of you here that know what a participle phrase is. Please do not begin with participle phrase. I see this way too often. Let me give you an example. Standing by the window, I could see that it was going to rain. Do you speak like that in real life? Standing by the window, thinking about it. No one speaks like that. We do not begin with participle phrase. So if you should ever choose to have a participle phrase in the beginning of your sentence, keep it, but immediately switch to a little bit more of a street kind of normal talk. Okay, so you have to vary your speech, your sentence structure. We've talked a lot about that, and hopefully you were able to remember some grammar. And thank you so much for attending today. All right, see you. Bye-bye.